In the name of God, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen.
Amen.
So I was hunting around for inspiration for this homily this morning, and I was in kind of a fun mood. So I Googled "We Three Queens." Don't do it. Although it was really fun, but don't do it. So Happy New Year to you all. I'm praying that 2019 will be a year of peace and health and hope and joy for all of us, and for all those we love and share our lives with as well. I also pray that it will be a year of further growth for the mission and grace of God among us, and that we'll all get to be joyful and grateful participants in God's mission of compassion and love for the whole world, starting right here at St. Mary's. And our gospel story today is a great way to start the year off right, because it has so much to say about the fact that our spirituality is a journey, a process, an evolution that mirrors the journey and process and evolution of what God is up to in Jesus the Christ. So let's take a look at this wonderful story of the visitation to the child Jesus and his family by the Magi, or wise men, or three kings, or whoever they may have been. We don't know for sure. Somebody definitely came to visit. That much we know for sure. And this visit was important enough to fit it into the gospel and into the story of Jesus that has been passed down to us for more than 2,000 years. It's a wonderful story. And this wonderful story has many different layers of meaning, as do all the wonderful stories in the Bible. It's entirely up to you which layer of meaning, which perspective you choose to focus on this year, at this particular time of your life, and at this particular stage of your own spiritual journey. Wherever you are, wherever you choose to be, God will gladly meet you there. And God does gladly meet you there every time. So I'd like to briefly explore three possibilities of understanding. There are surely many, many more, but these seem to be some of the major possibilities that presented themselves to me right here and right now. Three stages, which reflect three stages of spiritual progression, I think. How convenient. And so they are the literal, the metaphorical and allegorical, and the mystical or contemplative. These deepening ways of understanding coincide with stages along the way of spiritual growth. Because remember that this is a journey that we're talking about here. The spiritual life is always a journey that begins and ends with God. With God. So, a literal understanding of these things usually represents early stages of spiritual development. An allegorical or metaphorical understanding usually represents the middle stages of spiritual development. And a mystical or contemplative understanding usually represents more advanced stages of spiritual development. And if you get all three, then you're just like that star that these people were following to get to Jesus. So, the literal meaning is just that, of course. The story as it is at face value. Some unknown number of people of unknown origin came from the east, following a star in the night sky, to find and honor the child Jesus. They met with King Herod, who felt his power and authority would somehow be threatened by the birth of this child, and so secretly wanted to destroy him. The exotic pilgrims got wise to that fact. They were wise men, after all. And they cut Herod out of the rest of the story. Then they carried on to find the child Jesus and offer him gifts of reverence and homage. before returning to wherever they had come from in the first place. Even in its literal interpretation, this is a very beautiful story, and it sets the foundation of Jesus' lifelong acceptance of those who are considered to be outsiders by the majority population. It also sets the foundation for Jesus' lifelong persecution by those in power and earthly authority. That's a literal meaning to the story. The allegorical or metaphorical meanings. The major themes and details of this story can be taken to hold even deeper meanings that are symbolized or represented by the facts of the story. And so, the journey of these exotic travelers can be taken to symbolize the spiritual journey of all people, including us. Including us. We come searching for God, often from places that seem to be far away from God. Although later on we learn that was never the case, nor could it be, because we can never be far away from God. We often travel through darkness, but we're given lights to follow and to guide our way. Sometimes these lights are held for us by other people. Sometimes our way is illumined by the light within all of God's beautiful creation, like the stars. Sometimes as we move along the path to God, we learn that the light is both within us and calling us forward from a place out in front of us. That light is held by God. We call it the Holy Spirit. God within us and God beyond us. God calling to God. Deep calling unto deep, as the psalm says. When we find God, our first inclination is to worship. We fall down on our knees and we bow in humility before the awesome mystery that we find to be so much more than we could have ever asked for or even dreamed to imagine. And we want to give ourselves as gift. We want to give ourselves to this mystery, this love, this amazing grace we call God. We want to pour ourselves out in gratitude and praise with our very lives. Another part of this allegorical, metaphorical way of seeing the story is to focus on its larger political and historical themes. This is truth being spoken to power by ultimate truth. God has something to say to those who fancy themselves to be the rulers and the powerful ones of this earth. This is God casting down the mighty from their thrones, as Mary sang, and replacing them with the lowly, the small, the poor, the weak, the little ones. This is earthly power and authority being turned upside down and not wanting to go away quietly. This is revolution. And it's being led by a small, poor, vulnerable child on the margins of human society who would grow up to be a poor, vulnerable adult on the margins of human society, and who would stand against the earthly powers that rule by oppression and wealth and greed and military might. And he would win. And he would win by love alone. Those are some of the allegorical or metaphorical meanings. The mystical or contemplative meaning. This way of understanding always calls us to step back, to step way back, and to look at the big picture. At the big picture, to have the God's eye view, so to speak. It's at these later stages of spiritual development that we learn to see God everywhere, and we learn to see as God sees. As God sees. So, what is the big picture with regard to this story? Well, as always, for us as Christians, the big picture is Christ. But the big Christ, the cosmic Christ. This story tells us that the child Jesus was not just for the Jewish people of first century Palestine. From the moment he was born, he attracted all people to the light of God and excluded no one, ever. It becomes clear from looking at the story that all these characters, King Herod, the wise men from the east, Mary, and even Jesus himself, all these characters are involved in a story that goes far, far beyond their own lives and far, far beyond their own particular time and place in history. And the same is true for all of us. The same is true for all of us. This is what God is up to. This is the story of God. Every story is the story of God. The wise men came from someplace else because we all come from someplace else. We don't know where they came from. We don't really know where we came from either, do we? Really. And we don't know where they're going. We don't really know where we're going either, do we? Really. What we do know is that this story is all about God. This is the story of God. And God gave us Jesus to reveal the big picture to us. God gave us Jesus to shine the light that the darkness can never overcome. God gave us Jesus to show us and tell us and teach us and reach us with the astounding truth that God is all about us and we are all about God. God is all about us and we are all about God. That's the big picture. That's the God's eye view of everything. And it's pretty cool. That's a mystical or contemplative understanding of the story. So there you go. Pick your version of your understanding of this story. You can use one of mine if you want to, but even better, you can come up with one of your own. You have only to trust God, who lights our way from the inside and the outside, all along the way. So follow your stars all the way home to God. To God. Amen.